All right. Hello and good evening, and welcome to another of our subscriber events. And really excited tonight because we've got Sophie Etheridge here with us. Sophie, can you give everyone a wave, please, and say hello? And we're also joined by Camilla. Camilla, can you give everyone a wave, please, so they can see you or say hello? Camilla was part of Sophie's team for Sophie's little swim across the channel, and so I think we're just going to launch straight in. Sophie, I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and then I've got loads of questions that people have already sent in. So we'll go through those. If anything occurs to people on the way, just please chuck it in the chat. It might not be as smooth as we usually are because I haven't got Ella with me tonight. She had another engagement that she forgot about. So it's just me. Might not be as slick as usual, but I will do my best to manage all the questions, admitting people when they join in and so on. So here we go. Sophie, the obvious question to start with: why did you want to swim the English Channel?
Why not? So when I was teenager, about 14, 15, I was part of a channel relay swim. It was the first sort of open water event that I'd ever done, and made the final 6 for the team, and turned up in Dover, got on the boat and started being seasick before we'd left the harbour, and was then seasick for the next sort of 17, 18 hours, I think it was. And when I got off the boat, was told two things from different people. One was that their channel relay wasn't over until I'd done mine. And the other one was my friend turned around and just said to me that if I couldn't do it as a relay because I got too seasick, then I'd just have to do it solo. And that sort of started the niggle in the back of my mind. But I didn't really expect to do it, to be honest.
So that experience as a teenager, just to be clear, that was before you.
That was before I was disabled, yeah. So I was in a cycling accident in 2011, and it's only been since then that I've had disabilities and lots of health issues and things. So it then definitely didn't seem like it was going to happen. Okay.
And then obviously you've trained really, really hard, and I know you've built up, you've done lots of swims in preparation. How confident were you going into this?
Pretty confident. I was confident that I'd done everything that I possibly could have done to give me the best chance of getting across. I mean, I'd done all the training. The training has gone really well. I did Windermere 2-way a couple of years earlier, which was a can I swim that sort of distance sort of event, really. But I was in a wetsuit for that. And then in the last couple of years, it's been getting used to the cold. So I've been swimming all year round and gradually building my distance and improving my speed. I approached lots of different coaches and people with more experience than me throughout sort of the past 10 months, really, asking for any advice at all that I could have. I went on a couple of swim camps, to get as much knowledge as I could. So I couldn't really do more than what I'd done. So, I mean, the way that I thought of it when we were on the boat was I wasn't going to swim the channel. It wasn't, I'm hopefully going to swim the channel. It was, I'm going to swim the channel. And that was just the way mentally that I had to prepare myself for it, because I wanted to remove any doubts before I started.
Right. Okay, now I'm going to jump into it because I've got so many questions that come in from people. I'm just going to jump straight into those because I think they've got better questions than me. So Amy Enion has asked, I don't know if she's actually joined in yet, if she's here. Anyway, her question is, and I guess it's quite an obvious one as well. Did you expect your swim might be that long?
No. No. I don't know that I'd even have attempted it if I'd known it had been that long. It was something that one of the other support crew members asked me afterwards. He was like, if you'd known it was 29 hours that it was going to take you, would you have done it? And I was like, no, definitely not. So I did Windermere 2-way in 16 hours and 49 minutes, I think it was. And I've worked on my speed quite a bit since then. So I was saying to people, I'd aim for about 18 hours, but be happy with anything up to about 20. 20 being the maximum number of hours that I thought it might take me. But it took a bit longer than
that. Now there was a question actually that would follow on quite nicely from that. While you were swimming, this is this is a question from Melanie, but I'm going to adapt it slightly. She asked, did you have any idea how long you swam for? So when you were in the water, did you have any idea that you had gone beyond 16 hours, that you'd gone beyond 20 hours? Or were you just so focused on swimming that you just kept on going and had it in your head you'd go until someone told you to stop or you hit France?
When I got on the boat, I'd said to the crew, I'm going to aim for 18 hours, be happy with 20, but I'm just going to keep going till I get there. And I'd said to all of the crew, if I ask how long I've been in the water, I don't want to know. Tell me that you don't want to know. Because if you constantly think about it and keep thinking about it and asking questions, it becomes like a toddler's version of, are we nearly there yet, in the back of the car? But I think it was at about 20 hours, not far off, dead on 20 hours, I think, wasn't it, Camilla? Was it 22? I think it was 20, yeah. I randomly all of a sudden stopped and went, how long have I been in the water? And they were umming and ahhing over telling me or not, I think. But actually, I was really serious. I did need to know, because I didn't know quite how much longer I could go on for, because it was getting dark and it wasn't meant to be getting dark whilst France still looked like it was miles away. The idea was I started at night and I finished sort of early evening as the sun was setting. And it was early evening and it looked no closer than it had 5 hours earlier. And they said, you've been in for 20 hours. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll go to 24, and carried on swimming. And in my head, they didn't know it at the time, but in my head, it made sense to me, because I thought, well, if I can swim for the 24 hours, that sounds quite cool. I'm not sure if I'll get there, I don't know. But if I say that I've done 24 hours, not many people can say they've swum for a full day. So it kind of would still have a very similar to effect as what I was aiming for, which was to raise awareness of disabled swimmers and what they can achieve. But I didn't get told that I'd been in for 24 hours. And I don't remember asking how long I'd been in again for the rest of the swim. I didn't know what time I'd finished at. I didn't know that I'd swum for 29 hours until I got back on the boat and was actually told. And I don't think I was told until after I'd become a bit more human, to be honest, because I wasn't very human.
Can I put a question to Camilla at this stage? Because you were on the boat, you were obviously aware at 20 hours that was kind of where she was aiming for. You knew she'd hit 20 hours. She still had a long way to go. What was the mood like on the boat at the time, and what were you thinking, and what were you sort of planning to tell her, and then why did you then choose not to tell her again after that point?
The mood then actually was quite light, because, you know, she just sort of popped her head up like a seal and looked us in the eye and was like, I really want to know, how long have I been going? And we kind of looked at each other and were like, she really wants to know. When she's serious, she's serious. So we said, it's dead on 20 hours. She popped her head back down, swam off and went, tell me when it's been 24. And then she never quibbled or asked again. So we were like, if she's not asking, we're not telling.
Okay. Going back to another question that someone sent in. This is from Molly, and I think you've answered a bit of this when you did your introduction about this. So did you work with a specific? So I've got to admit some more people. Did you work with a specific coach, or did you kind of take advice from as many different people as you could?
So, I mean, as an open water coach, and I've taught swimming for years, I coached myself, basically. but I went on a swim camp in Wales. I also went down, I had a couple of weekends down at Dover Harbour with the Dover Channel training guys, and had a week in Cornwall with Loretta Cox, and had an aim for each of those things and what I needed to know from those people and what I wanted to get out of those weeks. So for Wales, one of the biggest issues I was having was with feeding, in that I didn't know what to have and didn't know what to try and that sort of thing. So they really helped me with that. When I was in Dover, I wanted to get my 6-hour qualifier done and also a night swim done, because I'd not done a night swim in the sea before, just to see how I'd get on. And then when I was in Cornwall, it was about bringing everything together and trying the feeding whilst in the sea with the different things, working out how it made me feel and sort of fine-tuning everything. But I mean, it was the actual swimming stuff I coached myself for, so it's more knowledge I got from others.
Yeah. Okay. And I think we've got a couple of other people who have joined the call tonight who are swimmers with disabilities as well. So we've got a couple of specific questions around that. So we've got one here. Is there a particular wheelchair that makes exiting, I guess that's exiting the water, easier at open water venues and I guess beaches as well?
Yes and no. So you can get beach wheelchairs and sort of off-road wheelchairs. The beach wheelchairs are the ones that have got like almost like balloon wheels. So they're much easier and much better to go over sand, but they can be quite difficult to push. It depends on people's needs, really. The good thing about the beach wheelchairs and some of the off-road chairs is they can actually go in the water, and they're designed to go in the water. So if, for example, you're paralyzed from a paraplegic or something, then there are certain chairs that almost like the armrests are almost like floats. So it makes it float, and then it can take you into the water deep enough that then the water takes over floating for you, if you like. The chair that I use, so I use a T-Light manual wheelchair, but I have a tri-ride attachment, which basically lifts my front casters up and makes it suitable for off-road. So I mean, for me, it's not really beaches. Despite the fact I swam the channel, I don't swim in the sea very often, because I'm in Cambridgeshire, so it's mainly rivers and lakes. So it tends to be getting across fields or through little wooded areas and things that is the important bit for me, which is what my tri-ride does. So I think it really depends where you are and what sort of entrance it is. The big thing that helps me is knowing what that entry point is going to be like. Is it going to be you've got to slide off and be able to climb back onto a pontoon, or is it going to be a slipway that you can walk down? And if it's a slipway, is it a short walk down so that you don't need your chair and things like that? So yeah, it's really specific to the person, but there are gradually more and more chairs becoming available that are suitable to take into the water, and that's the big difference. I mean, a lot of people that I know that use their wheelchairs to get as close as they can and then bum shuffle, which is what most of the time I do.
Yeah.
Or walk with my crutches.
Okay. So we have got someone here that I don't know if she's actually joined the, because I know the questions, but I can't see everybody at the same time who's joined. But Sabrina says, I'm living with a physical disability from a motor accident and also have fibromyalgia, which is similar to you.
Yeah, I have.
I sometimes feel my body is pitted against me. I want to do long distance swimming like you, but I was wondering how you do it. So that's obviously a very, very general, broad sweeping question. But have you got any maybe just some ideas on getting started, how to find the right support, and where to go, who to turn to?
I mean, one of the things that really helped was ADOS, which is the Community of Disabled Swimmers, so the Adapted and Disabled Open Water Swimmers group, because there were so many people in the group that understood. A lot of it comes down to pacing. So there's something called the spoon theory that a lot of people with chronic illnesses have heard of, but it's basically where each activity takes up a certain number of spoons, so a certain amount of energy, if you like, and you only have that amount of spoons each day, and you have to work out what activity is going to take what number of spoons so that you've still got enough spoons at the end of the day to still do whatever you need to do. So actually for a lot of my training, it was I was either swimming, eating, or asleep. I gave up quite a lot, but it was worth it, and it's what I enjoyed doing as well. But it really was, at first it was trial and error, working out what my body could tolerate. And the way that I trained was slightly different from quite a few people, I think, in that whereas you'll tend to be told to avoid sort of the boom and bust, so you have like one really intense week and then you're absolutely knackered and can't train for a week and a half. That was actually the way that I ended up finding worked best for me. So I would do a week of technique and maybe a few interval sessions, and then I would have 1 week where I focused solely on distance. So I would go and do a 5-6 hour swim, which would take all the energy out of me, and I would then have to rest. But I knew that I'd met that hours, either time wise or distance goal that I needed. And I could then go back to doing just really easy technique sessions the following week as I was recovering from it.
Mm-hmm.
So it varies from person to person and how fibro and things affect you. But it is a trial and error job at first.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so just a practical question about the swim, or about swimming in general, actually. Do you ever get cramp, and how do you manage this?
Normally, no. But actually, there was one occasion when I did during the channel swim, and I think it was because I'd started to get cold. So into the second night, the wind really picked up and it was quite chilly, actually. But because I am constantly in pain, cramp isn't always a huge deal for me. So it was on the least painful of my two legs. So because I'm so used to more pain than that already, it wasn't such a huge deal. To stop myself from getting cramp, every now and again I stretched, much to I think Camilla's amusement and the people on the boat. I don't think they quite knew what I was doing, to be honest. But every now and again I would sort of stretch as I was swimming along. So all of a sudden, basically my feet would pop out of the water, I think. I don't know if that's what they could see. That's what I imagined in my head that they could see. I don't know if that was right, Camilla. Pretty much, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, every now and again. And sort of wiggle my toes and things just to make sure that I still had feeling in them. Yeah. But yeah, no, I've never suffered with cramp too much, thankfully, but I was constantly drinking as well, and obviously hydration is quite important with it.
Yeah. Okay, and the next question, it refers to something that you've already mentioned briefly, but I think this is a good chance to say a little bit more about this. This is from Mary Ann's. Is there a list or a good website that has information about accessible swim places? And I know that's a project that you are working on or have worked on.
Yeah, it's something that I've been trying to do for a while, but don't have enough technology knowledge to do it, basically. Good place to ask is in the Facebook group that I mentioned, or just to drop me a message with the area that you're in. I always find whenever I'm asking someone if they think the spot is suitable, I ask for pictures, because then it allows me to judge for myself rather than someone else assuming on what I can and can't do as a wheelchair user, because I can walk short distances as well. If it's fine up to a point, but then there's sort of 15 meters of walking, would I be able to manage that 15 meters and that sort of thing? At the moment, no, there isn't an official list or anything. We're trying to work out how to create one at the moment and create a map of the accessible swim spots. I think I did a bit of work with the Wild Swim app. And there are options on there now to actually add accessibility information for the swim spots. But I don't know how many people actually use those bits of information, but you might find something on there.
Okay. All right, and this is another general question. I think this would be relevant for anybody, whether they're swimming with a disability or not. If you have one piece of advice for someone aspiring to swim the channel, what would that be?
Get as much knowledge as possible.
Okay, quick question, quick answer on that
Yeah.
one. Okay, from Victoria. Hello, awesome swimmer. So there you go. I'm passionate about ability rather than disability, of which you are a shining example. However, it isn't up to... Oh, sorry, the question is really long and scrolls off my screen. Let me see if I can get to the end of it. Sorry, I didn't plan that one very well. Might it be possible? Okay, so what she's saying, it isn't possible, it isn't up to her to tell someone with a disability how they might or might not access the water. Might it be possible to come up with an accessibility toolkit to help people access the water? I think Victoria's actually joined this course. I don't know if you want to explain that. Can you just jump in a minute, Victoria, and just explain the question, exactly the question you're trying to ask there?
Thank you. Yes. So I come across people all the time with things like fibromyalgia and people in situations where they can't access the sea. And I'm very, very well aware that people who are able-bodied are very good at sort of dictating and saying, well, you need to use a wheelchair, you need to use this, you need to use that. And I think having some sort of almost like a yes, no, but yes, can, can't, etc. Some sort of toolkit that has many, many options at the bottom that people can access to find out the best way and the options available for them accessing lake, beach, pool, sea, whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. So, I mean, there isn't an actual toolkit. Most people, if it's coaches and things and they've had someone with a disability come and ask coach them and the coach is unsure on what to do, they ask questions in the Facebook group and then they get responses from lots of people with different disabilities or even similar disabilities to that person to give advice. It's very much talking, where I suggest you start is by talking to the individual.
But I mean, if we had something bigger, you know, so I don't know what's available to help people. So if somebody came to me and said, I'd like to get into the sea, how can I do it? I wouldn't know where to go. And I know, yeah, the groups are fantastic, but you're asking the same questions time and time and time again. I just wonder whether we could create some sort of go-to flowchart.
Yeah, so I'm hoping to create some resources similar to that, but I can definitely do a flowchart in that as well if a flowchart would be better. I mean, the sort of thing that I'm hoping to do is have a list of different sorts of equipment that's available to help people and that might help people. So like talking about the different types of beach wheelchairs or off-road chairs that you can get. Even down to talking about the different kinds of crutches you can get. So my crutches fold in half so I can put them in a tow float so I can actually swim with them. And I tow them behind me. So I did the Thames Marathon. I can't remember if it's last year or the year before, and I actually did it. It was the first time I'd done it solo without a support group going from one lock to the next and meeting me. And I actually towed my crutches through the Thames Marathon swim and did it myself using a rock raft.
Brilliant.
So there are so many different, I think the issue comes is there's so many different pieces of kit and so many people use such random bits of kit because they find ways around things. So like there's one person that has got a swimming pool noodle, like the woggles that you use when you're teaching kids to swim, and they've cut a hole in it and they wrap that around their walking stick and they attach that to their tow float so it bobs along next to them.
Brilliant.
Excellent.
So there's real DIY stuff out there that people have made themselves, and you get to know and work out what works for you. I don't know anyone else that has exactly the same needs as me and uses the exact same kit as me. Some people with visual impairments, for example, some of them only like to swim being tethered to someone. Some of them prefer to be swimming head up breaststroke with someone talking to them, guiding them, telling them what they can see around them and if they need to go left, right, or whatever. Some people prefer having someone on the side with a radio set, so that they can guide them. They're seeing them and they can tell them what they're seeing and which direction they need to swim in and that sort of thing. So it's really, really difficult. And I've not quite figured out how to do a sum up of everything, because there is just so much out there that people use and do. Which is why I say photos and conversations and almost brainstorming with the individual.
Sounds like it might be worth me connecting you two after the call, to discuss further, because I know Victoria, you've got a swimming location that you're trying to make as accessible as possible, haven't you, down on the Isle of Wight?
Yeah, that's fine.
So I think that would be really good if you could connect with Sophie afterwards.
I love the way she just slipped in there when I did the Thames Marathon.
Yes.
Thank you.
So we've got a swimming question now, a question on swimming technique. So, and I don't know whether this person is asking because they have a disability or just because they find this a difficult thing in swimming anyway. Any tips on developing balance and stability in the water? And I guess that has been a challenge for you in the past. How you go about dealing with that?
So I don't kick my legs at all, which is fine in the river and the lake, but it's a bit more complicated in the sea, I discovered. But managed to come up with a few ideas. So I mean, when I was swimming, when I was in a lot of pain in particular, I actually swam almost cross-legged or cross-ankled. So my stronger leg was supporting my weaker leg. But that was really hard work on my core, which I quickly discovered and reverted and just took it. But also, it's very much about the positioning of your legs. So as odd as it sounds, swimming with your legs open is obviously a lot more stable than swimming with them next to each other. And actually, by having my legs open slightly, so not at all streamlined, but by that point it didn't really matter because I wasn't streamlined anyway, the waves couldn't throw me about quite so much. But it's a lot about building your core strength in terms of balance, I think. And just if you've got one side weak than the other, it's learning to compensate for it. So I did a lot of work in the gym on strength and conditioning, so to make sure that I was even, if you like, so my arms were even.
Yeah. Okay, I've got a question now from Joe Payne about mental. Yeah, you talked a lot about the physical preparation and all the training you did. This question is about how did you mentally prepare for your channel swim?
When I did my Windermere swim, Helen, who is in the room, helped me.
Helen, you can give everyone a wave if you like.
Because it threw me a curveball just before my swim, and I didn't know if I was swimming, and then I wasn't swimming, and it got a bit interesting, let's just say. I have been through what people call the Dover Coaster before, because I did a relay last year. So I know what it's like to sit and wait and actually not know if you're going to get your swim or not. And the way that I actually got around that this time was I turned it into a holiday. And I thought of it as a holiday, but I was just going to swim the channel in the middle of it somewhere, hopefully. Because it was just how I dealt with it. I mean, if you're going to swim the channel, you're going to have done a lot of long swims, or you should have done a lot of long swims anyway. And I think everyone has their own coping strategies and methods that they use. I mean, I played games, so effectively one person I spy. So I went through the alphabet trying to think of something on the boat that I could see or that I knew was on the boat, starting with the first letter for each all the way through the alphabet, because it took up time. But I think going from someone that wasn't disabled and going through the process of becoming disabled and getting used to almost a new way of living actually really helped me prepare, because I know what it's like to have to constantly try to overcome things and have people say, well, you can't do it, you should be doing this, you should be doing it in that way. And I mean, it was a few years ago, and it was a real light bulb moment, and it was with a swimming coach. And I was adamant and trying to learn to kick my legs, but it was really painful and my legs weren't at all effective, and it was a bit pointless. And looking back, it's only now that I see that it was utterly pointless and a waste of time. But she said to me, Sophie, why are you trying to kick your legs? And I went, because I'm meant to. And she went, just do it however works for you. And I was like, oh, yeah. So I've sort of had that approach ever since. So any sort of mental blip, I thought about the journey that I've been on from someone that couldn't walk at all to someone that swimming the English Channel and in the middle of the channel. And if I could get over all of those things I've been through, and all the mental health issues and things that I've had that come with that sort of process, if you like, then I could get through the next hour of swimming. I also, with jellyfish, imagined a jellyfish massacre, because I imagined them all dying, because I don't like jellyfish, and it was the only way I could get through being stung.
Yeah,
but it worked.
And then Helena says, massive congratulations. I can't imagine swimming such a length of time. What training program have you followed? We spoke about that. Yeah. She's asked, how would you describe your channel swim, which you've been talking about a lot, but maybe you could just say, maybe what was the best part during the swim? What was your highest point during the swim, and maybe your lowest point, and how you got through that?
I don't really know. I mean, I think a highlight for me was the sunrise on the first morning, because it really was a beautiful sunrise and we were very lucky. I don't actually remember most of the swimming for the day. I think one of the high points was probably seeing the midpoint buoy. So I wasn't expecting to be able to see it. Not many people do, but it was probably, I don't know, was it about 100 meters away from us, Camilla? I don't know. It didn't look very far, but
probably closer, but we seemed to be by it for hours.
Yeah, I didn't know that bit. Yeah, I saw it once and that was it. I didn't look again, but I knew that I'd made that sort of halfway point, and that was a real boost to me. I didn't know that it was already like I'd been in for the water for 16 hours. I didn't know that bit. Just the fact that I'd got to the halfway point was like, yay, okay, it's fine. I would say landing was a high point, but I'm not gonna lie, it wasn't. A few days later it was a high point, but the landing was interesting and challenging for me, which I always knew it was going to be. Low points was definitely with the jellyfish, and I think, I don't know when it was between when I'd asked for the 20 after being told I'd been in for 20 hours and the end, so it was somewhere in that 9 hours. And I just sort of had been trying to decide between listening to my heart or my head, because it got so choppy and the swells had got quite big. The boat was really rocking, and I was finding that one moment I had sight of the bottom of the boat, and the next I had sight of the pilot at eye line with me. And I was a bit scared that I was going to get squashed by the boat. And that, in combination with then being stung by jellyfish at the same time, and being in a lot of pain and being fatigued, I don't know if I actually said, I think I'm going to get out, I can't do this, or if that was just in my head, I'm not sure. But I think Mike got in, who was another one of my support crew who was a swimmer. He got in not long after, whatever it was that I said. And although he sort of didn't really swim in or bobbed, he was shouting things at me. And Mike's an amputee, so he gets the process of becoming disabled and knew some of the deeper reasons of why I was doing it and what I had to prove both to myself and everybody else. And that was really, really helpful. But I'd say that was probably the worst. And I imagine that was probably around 26, 27 hours. But yeah, it's a long time to know what the high and low, there were a lot of points along the way.
Okay, I'm going to jump to some of the questions that people have put in the chat. If you're okay to carry on. And you've mentioned pain quite a lot, and I know that's something that's a constant in your life anyway. I was wondering how you deal with pain whilst in the water. Is a question from Rachel.
Mental preparation and medication. So throughout my whole swim, I was having pain medication. So I'd been what I imagine a lot of people would say would be super and over organized, and literally had absolutely everything written down, from what I was, medication I needed, what time, how many hours in, what I was drinking and eating or was hoping to drink and eat. So I was having my steady painkillers throughout. We had one issue because obviously I was in the water for more than 24 hours. I'd sorted it so that I didn't take my green medication in the morning, because I can cope with not having one dose because it's all slow release. But when it got up to a full day, we then had to try and get me to actually take my full medication, which is about 8 tablets. And trying to take 8 tablets in the sea, in the dark, whilst holding a bottle of water. I don't know how many I actually swallowed. I know some sort of went a bit mushy and gross, and it made me feel a bit sick afterwards. So medication helped, and it was distraction techniques. So things like the I Spy game, and thinking about why I was doing the swim and what the reason was for me doing the swim. But again, you've kind of built up and worked out what techniques work for you because you'll have done that training, and that is part of the pain. Dealing with the pain is part of the training. For me, that was a big part of the training. It was learning to overcome that pain mentally. The pain was always going to be there, and it was trying to not trick my mind, but sort of trick my mind, in that the pain was there, but there was nothing I could do about it. So there was no point in worrying about it. So there are there's pain in terms of, oh no, it's an injury pain, I've got a niggle, it's a muscle, it's that sort of pain. But that's very different to my normal pain. Right. And because I can tell the difference, I knew which pains I needed to actually be concerned about over which ones are just pain. As odd as that will sound to someone that doesn't have chronic pain.
Okay, next question. This is actually a question from you, Helen. Did you get bored at all?
Yes.
And how, apart from I Spy, what else did you think about or
sang songs? Sang songs. What else did I do? I don't know. Played games.
Made up jokes.
What?
Made up jokes.
Yeah, made up some very bad jokes, which weren't really jokes. Which were to get through the jellyfish more than anything. So because I was worried about being hit by the boat, I decided to think about what would happen to a jellyfish if a boat landed on top of it. And I decided that it would be squashed. And then the jellyfish was still stinging me and it was getting worse. So I decided to imagine them being, see what happened if they went through the propeller on the boat. So then I decided it was jellyfish smoothie. It was just how I dealt with it. And I also blamed Mike, I think it was, quite a bit. I think I shouted at Mike quite a bit, actually. And whatever happened, it was his fault. And that was somehow comforting.
Yeah. Okay. Practical question from Lisa. I don't know how you pronounce that. How do you manage getting in and out of the boat?
With great difficulty. Getting off the boat wasn't too bad. So the boat that I used and the pilot I used were the same people that I used last year. So I knew what to expect on the boat. And I'd also been sent a video of the boat so that Mike, who was on my crew, who's an amputee, could see what it was like and if he'd be able to manage it. And I originally had Helen Ball, who was on my team, but unfortunately she was unwell, so couldn't come. So we'd had a lot of communication beforehand. Getting on the boat from shore was fine. Getting off the boat was going down a ladder, but it doesn't have many steps. But my issue was I can't always sense where my legs, where my feet actually are. So for getting off, Mike went down before me on, because there's a platform you can stand on at the bottom, and helped me down the ladder. Getting back on it was a little bit less graceful and tricky. So on the way, so because it was because I landed in Calais basically, it was a really long shallow beach, so they had to get the little rib boat out to come in with me, which is why on my track it looks like I haven't actually landed. And when we got back in the rib boat after I'd landed, we were actually on the way back, and I said to Lance, I was like, Lance, how on earth am I going to get back on the boat? And he went, I don't know, but we'll manage it somehow. And I was like, great, this is fabulous after 29 hours to hear this. And knowing that I had that ladder to climb up was absolutely terrifying. But I think everyone apart from Mia, who was driving the boat and holding the boat at the time, helped get me back on the boat. I don't remember it very much because I wasn't particularly with it, and had a bit of mild hypothermia and was not a healthy spring chicken. But it was, we had, I think there was a person each side on the bottom of the platform who helped me up the first few steps and then basically pushed my bum up the steps. And then there were people at the top that also helped lift me up and got me onto the floor. Yeah, as Camilla's just said, Sophie was heaved onto the boat. Yeah, it wasn't pretty, and there are no photos or video evidence of it at all for that exact reason. Yeah. So but yeah, it was interesting getting back on. It was fine getting off. And it would have been fine getting on if I had only swum for 20 hours.
Yeah. Okay, I might look distracted, and because I'm looking at the other screen where I've got the comments, and some of them are just comments. Someone brilliant, read the I Spy game, and then Kathy says someone said to me the event is just the victory lap.
It was a very long lap then.
Which is a very long lap. Andrew Griffiths says jellyfish suck.
Yeah.
And then a question from Michael. Do you question yourself? If so, how do you deal with negative thoughts? It's a little bit more on the mental preparation.
Yeah. As I said right at the beginning, I'd gone in with the attitude, it's not that I was hoping to go and swim the channel, it was I am going to swim the channel. And I think that removed quite a lot of the negative thoughts that I could have had. I knew that I'd done absolutely everything possible to make it a successful crossing. It was just down to the conditions on the day and me, and I just had to get through it and lump with whatever I got. There were moments where I doubted myself, like when I stopped and I said to Camilla, it's just not going to happen, I'm getting out. And there were several of them through the swim, and each time I thought of something different to keep me going. And it was it's almost like having a bank of memories that I know that make me more determined. And because I've got that bank of memories that make me more determined, so it's when people have said, oh, you can't do this because you're disabled, you'll never be able to do that, you won't do this, and them saying that makes me want to do it more and prove them wrong. And so having those few memories and feelings there, I could draw on them at moments where I was doubting myself. So I mean, the last time I doubted myself was actually as I was crawling up the beach, and I stopped, and it was quite a long crawl, because it was shallow so long. It was a sandy beach, so we'd landed on sand, so we knew I could crawl rather than on shingle. But I was literally clawing my way up the beach, and I said to Lance, I can't go any further, and he was like, you're not out of the water, you've got to keep going. There was quite a bit of swearing going on at him, but actually at one point I stopped and I said, no, you've swum for 20, however long it is, you've swum for blooming hours, you've got this far, you can see where I could see where Lance was standing on dry land, and I went, you've overcome that, you've got through the jellyfish stings, it's not much further, keep going. And that's kind of how I overcame it, really. It was breaking it all down. When a moment of doubt came, it was working out why that moment of doubt was there.
Okay. Yeah, I'm still scrolling through the comments. Sea swimming is definitely not about glamour.
No.
Okay, here's a quite a good question. How, because I remember you talking about this with Ella the other day. How has your recovery from the swim been, and was it easier or harder than you expected?
Harder, but I think it's because I swam for longer. I don't know. One of the biggest issues I had was I couldn't eat for about 3 days. So my lips and face, well, when my mum saw me, she said that it looked like I'd had 6 back rounds of Botox and all of them had gone wrong. Because it was that swollen. It was really, really bad. Towards the end of the swim, I think there were a few discussions over the possibility of getting me out, because I was starting to really struggle to swallow even liquids. And we tried pretty much everything we could think of, and there was just nothing I could do. It was almost like having thousands of paper cuts on the inside of my mouth and having salt in them at the same time. So I think that was probably the hardest bit. I mean, as soon as I got back on the boat, the main priority was getting me warm. And I then managed to, with some help, get bum shuffled down the stairs into the inside a bit of the boat, and fell asleep for 2 hours solid. And once I slept for 2 hours, I actually felt all right, and I went and sat up on the deck and got changed and was quite happy. Was obviously utterly exhausted, and it's only been in the past week that I felt normal again. So it's taken 4 weeks to get back to normal, but it was more the fatigue than the pain, which I wasn't expecting. So I was expecting my pain to be really, really high, and it was for a few days. I couldn't walk at all for about 3 days, and was only able to, not even short distances, and it was a good week and a half before I could walk using just crutches. But it was the fatigue that really got me. Which I wasn't, as I said, I wasn't expecting to swim for 29 hours.
Yeah.
But it was anything that I did, even having a shower, it was like being in a fibro flare up constantly, where I really struggle with exhaustion. So even getting up and having a shower, I needed a nap after it. So I'd get up, have a shower, and go back to bed and sleep for another 6 hours.
Yeah. Okay. So the questions are coming there. We don't normally have this. The questions are coming in thick and fast today. So you've obviously inspired a lot of people with your swims. So Rachel is asking, I don't know if this is a good question to ask at this stage, do you have any more challenges lined up?
Yes, but I'm going on holiday next week, and I'm not announcing anything till afterwards.
Okay. We can move swiftly.
I've decided I'm not making any decisions. So when we finished, it's been a very surreal month, to be honest, and everybody keeps asking me, and I decided that I wanted to make sure that I was going to be 100% recovered, both physically and mentally, before I actually sign up to anything. So I'm going on holiday next Friday, and so I said I'm leaving it, and I'm not getting back into any sort of intense training at all till after my holiday, and then I can deal with it after then.
Okay. So a question here, and I think this is a question about channel swimming and the rules of channel swimming.
Yeah.
Should there be an allowance for people who can't walk or have mobility difficulties? So obviously you mentioned, and I guess this was prompted by your description of not being able to land on the rocks and having to claw your way up the beach.
In my opinion, yes, there needs to be an allowance. It comes down to the observer and the pilot that you use. So if you do have a disability and you want to do it, research your pilots and talk to your pilots before you book anything. That's really, really important. If you land and it's a cliff face, you can just do a touch because it's not safe to get out. So if it's not safe for you to get out because you're on the rocks and the rocks are slippy or whatever, then you can get away with just a touch. But actually, so at the beginning of the swim, you have to swim to shore and climb out and be clear of the water, and then get the go ahead from the boat to get back in the water and swim back past the boat that you've just swum from. And then on the way up, when you get out, there has to be land between you and the water. More disabled people are looking and starting to swim the channel, and I think it's something that needs to be reviewed. But it is, marathon swimming is very particular in its rules, and they've always been the same, and I think it's going to take a lot of people to get them to change their minds. We had a plan in place, so originally, like I said earlier, my crutches fold, and I was going to swim in and Mike was going to come in with me, but land just after me, and I was going to crawl out, and then he was going to lob my crutches at me so that I could then actually walk out and stand up. Which obviously didn't happen. So I mean, one of the panic mode, I went into panic mode as I realized that I was nearly landing, because I was like, it's Mike's not on the boat, how am I going to get out? I didn't know if Lance had my crutches or what I was going to do. Turned out I couldn't walk anyway, so it didn't really matter. But didn't know that at that point. It's something that needs to be talked about, definitely, because there's a lot of rules and a lot of things that are putting people with disabilities off swimming things like the channel because of the rules that are there.
Okay. Well, we've got channel swimming legend Sally Minty Gravett is on the call. I don't know if she can give a wave. Well done again, Sophie. She's just sharing her congratulations as she's a fellow member of the 24-hour swim club and in total awe of your swim. Well, you can read the comments in full afterwards. She's asking, how cold did you get, or was it more tiredness which enhanced the coldness? We are all aware that kicking helps us stay warmer. So obviously, if you can't kick, you lose one of the techniques that people use to help keep warm.
So I didn't really feel the cold, or I don't remember complaining about the cold until quite a way into the night on the second day. So when I'd been going 23 hours, Camilla, 24 hours. So it wasn't till right near the end that I started to actually feel cold. But when I did, I knew I don't get cold very easily. I think the water temperature averaged about 17.5 degrees during the swim. But it's always the wind chill that gets me, and the wind really picked up. And that was what was making me cold. And where I've worked on my core and my legs are so buoyant, my feet actually quite often stick out the water. So my feet were cold as well. And I ended up using my feeds to warm me up. So at first it was, I'd remembered a chat that I'd had at a swim camp that I did with a bloke called Phil. And he'd done a Bristol Channel swim last year, so England to Wales. And he'd taken 3 red dragon teddy bears on the boat with him. And when he was feeling cold, he'd imagined that the dragons were blowing fire around him to keep him warm. So I was trying to remember those sorts of things. And I mean, at first I was using the feed to think of it warming me from the inside out. So it was going into my mouth, it was going down my throat, it was going into my stomach, and then it was warming me from the inside out. But towards the end, I think I actually ended up tipping part of my feeds over my head and hugging my drink bottle, because I was just getting so cold. I got back on, so Lance had taken my dry robe to shore, and wrapped that around me as soon as I was clear of the water. And then when I got back on the boat, I think I swapped dry robe because mine had got wet. I'd got a beanie hat on. I'd taken hand warmers with me. And then I think I'd had a blanket or two thrown on top of me as well. But I was mildly hypothermic. It's the cold. It takes a lot for me to shiver, and I was getting very shaky and very shivery. But as soon as I was out of the wind and downstairs, I was fine.
And we normally wrap up these things after an hour, and we are nearly at time. But I think for those of you who weren't here at the beginning, we've also got Camilla on the call, and Camilla was part of Sophie's team. So I think it'd be really nice just to ask Camilla a quick question before we wrap up. You were on the boat the whole time she was doing the swim. I mean, what sort of emotional roller coaster did you go through while she was doing the swim? And I mean, you must have had times when you thought she's got this. You must have had times when you thought she's not going to do this. And tell us a little bit about what it was like to be her support and part of her team.
It was, well, first of all, it was an absolute pleasure to be invited to be involved. And my first thought when we were disappearing out of Dover Harbour was, what have I got myself into? But then when you look back at Dover and you just see the white cliffs and you see the castle all lit up, you're like, yeah, this is going to be an amazing journey. It really was an amazing journey. And I only doubted Sophie just literally the once when she looked up at me one time and said, I can't do this. The swell had really picked up. It's when the boat was almost falling on her, for want of a better description. And I was like, if she thinks that, then now I think that. And that was when sort of the crew all got together and had a complete powwow. But you have to think that was the first time I'd been out there doing that. And you've got this experienced crew who are looking at me like, don't panic, woman, it's all under control. And they really did have it under control. You know, they had Sophie's back 110%, which was super reassuring. And they knew just that fine line of making sure she got there, but equally keeping her safe enough to get there. So Sophie says I got a bit flappy a couple of times. I kind of was a bit catastrophizing the situation, which, you know, is a learning curve for everybody, isn't it? And yeah, it was really great. It was very emotional from a personal point of view, because I'd just done a relay only about 3 or 4 weeks before. So I was reliving my amazing trip with my team. And that was one thing that I said to Sophie, that we were lucky enough to celebrate together, whereas Sophie kind of flopped on the deck, you know, a little bit of nudity, a little bit of rehydration, and then she just slept. So there wasn't that absolute elation. So we still haven't managed to share that moment yet.
Yeah. So it's 8 o'clock. Sophie, is there anything else you want to say before we wrap up? Because I think that it's been truly amazing having you on here. And I mean, if I'll send you the list of the comments that have come through afterwards if you haven't had a chance to see them as they've been coming in. There's a lot of awe, a lot of hero worship almost, I think. Yeah, you're a total legend, for example. So, you know, people have been so impressed, so inspired by what you've done. Is there anything you want to say to everyone here before we wrap up for the evening?
I mean, one thing that I keep saying to people is that I didn't do the swim for the sort of recognition that I've got, or for any recognition. I did it to raise awareness of what people with disabilities can do when they've got that right and understanding support in place. Like Camilla said, the crew were absolutely fantastic. And it was only knowing and being 100% sure that they would put my safety first, but they would also, they knew what I was capable of, because we'd spoken beforehand and they'd seen me swim. They knew me. They were so one of the crew members was the crew member that remembers me still as a 15-year-old kid being sick for sort of 17, 18 hours. So it's gone sort of full journey with me. But it was to try and show people that they shouldn't put limits on themselves, because there's no way, if you'd asked me if I could swim for 29 hours, I'd have laughed in your face. And people keep asking me how I did it, and I keep saying I have no clue. But I think it shows that everybody is more capable and capable of a lot more than they think they are.
I think that's a great way to wrap it up. Sophie, thanks so much for joining us this evening, and thank you, Camilla, for coming along as well. Thank you for everyone who's joined us. I will end recording, and